terrorism and human trafficking is weakened. They have given the state until March 3rd to respond. 4 men have been arrested following a shooting incident in South Oropouche. A woman reported that on the night of February 3rd, she saw 3 men outside her home, with one entering her yard. When she peered through a window, he fired at her but missed. Police responded quickly, intercepting a Toyota RAV4 and arresting 4 suspects from Port-of-Spain, Laventille, Mover, and La Brie. A loaded Taurus pistol was recovered. Investigations are ongoing. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Division, 2 men were arrested in a police operation in Toko. One was found with a homemade shotgun and ammunition, while the other was detained for possessing camouflage clothing. Embattled Commissioner of Police Erla Airwood Christopher is preparing to take legal action against the Police Service Commission after it failed to rescind her suspension. Her attorneys, led by Senior Counsel Pamela Elder, argue that the suspension was unlawful and lacked due process. Elder criticized the Police Service Commission for not providing specific reasons for the decision and for failing to present evidence supporting the allegations against Airwood Christopher. The legal challenge follows the Commissioner of Police's recent arrest in connection with the importation of sniper rifles. Elder warned that if the suspension is not reversed, judicial review proceedings will be initiated. As of late yesterday, no court documents had been filed, but Elder confirmed that legal actions is in progress. Well, that's your news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Attention everyone! The Office of the Prime Minister Communications has launched a brand new WhatsApp channel designed to keep you informed and connected like never before. Get real-time updates, breaking news, and important information directly from the source. With our WhatsApp channel, you'll always know what's happening when it's happening. Joining is easy. Use your phone camera, scan this QR code, tap follow, and that's it. You're in. Be sure to tap the notification bell to never miss an update. Stay informed, stay empowered. Join the conversation with the Office of the Prime Minister Communications WhatsApp channel today.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
WESN.
With regards to just how human nature causes us to make similar mistakes. How the fact that some of the errors that we see here are actually errors that occur around the world. Because in TNT we have an issue with implementation. Now, arguably some might say that we have it worse than other jurisdictions, other nations. But regardless, even if that is true, I'm not saying it is, even if that is true, it could be that at the end of the day, just because they're potentially better than us doesn't mean that they still can't make the same mistakes. And to be honest, I'm not necessarily going to say they're better than us, but the circumstances of what we have to deal with and what other nations have to deal with are always different. The challenges are always different. And to some extent, they might have a set of issues that we don't know. As much as we consume foreign media, not just America or Canada or the United Kingdom, but other parts of Europe. Our affiliate is France 24. They speak to a lot of issues within both France and the European Union. And we see implementation problems abound. Take, for example, what's going on with whenever we have a pothole, a leak, and then they fix the leak, but then someone digs up the fix later. Or they pave a pothole and WASA digs up the road later because of a leak that is found only after the fact. Or they leave it there to fester. Then someone says, well, to hell with it, I'll fix it, and then it's dug up again. And it seems as though we could never actually get a road permanently fixed for the most part, when the road network, say around Port of Spain or beyond. But to some extent, that phenomenon happens in New York. I saw a video talking about, I think it was recycling, I can't remember, but basically new techniques for road paving and road repair, and one of the things they lamented on was, as roads were fixed in New York, a utility company will come and take it up all over again. Biggest city in the world, or at least one of the richest, if not the richest city in the world. So, one of the issues that has captivated the world, but in my opinion, it does not necessarily mean the world as a collective fully understands the issue, is what's going on between Israel and Palestine. Because it seems as though most people want to take sides, most people who speak out about the issue, the activists, the protesters, they want to take sides, whether they're pro-Israel, pro-Palestinian, right? And the problem is there is no winner in this scenario. This is essentially a blood feud where both sides have significant, long-running issues with the other, to the point where it is questionable, if left to their own devices, if they could coexist. And I have said, essentially, if I have not outright said it, my suggested solution, the necessity for real peacekeepers to enforce peace, not just ceremonial people to kind of stand in the middle and hope that nobody calls them out on their bluff, would be required to forcibly separate essentially the two sides. Because at the end of the day, Hamas will do what it does, and the IDF will do what it does, and the civilians will be caught in the middle. And to some extent, civilians on both sides will condone the unethical military behavior on both sides. Don't get it twisted. It's both sides, which is why a third party is needed. Now, in comes the new American president saying, well, what if the US takes over Gaza? And it's shut down. And to some extent, I can understand why, and I don't necessarily think it's a good idea for America to kind of take custody and responsibility over Gaza. Now, it might actually be, at least in half of the equation, one of the better solutions, because then now the IDF is basically, you're basically telling the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, are you willing to fight past us just to continue whatever operations you want to do against Hamas and whichever other Palestinian force in Gaza that you want to go after? And that might give the IDF pause. It might not give Hamas pause, and Hamas might even be foolish enough to attack American troops, in which case we could get to a solution, but it might not be a good solution, if you know what I mean. More importantly, to have, it will be difficult for any American-only unit to be seen as objective and unbiased. It will be difficult. And I think perhaps that's one of the reasons why certain stakeholders like Saudi Arabia, they're not looking forward to that. Egypt, Jordan, other Middle Eastern American allies, they don't necessarily want to see that. Now, the politics of the region is something most people don't understand. And the politics of the region is intertwined with not necessarily the religion per se, but the perception of the religion, the involvement of religious figures, or the use of religious dogma to justify certain things. And it's caused this issue to be far more complicated than a lot of people realize, because my one issue with this is not, and also Australian Prime Minister, he is saying, no, let's not do this. Now, to some extent, I don't know if President Trump's idea is really properly thought out, to be honest. It sounds more like the beginning of something that could be good or bad. But what the opponents of this, and again, like I said, I don't necessarily think this is a great solution. It might work on the Israeli side, at least to a point. I doubt it will work on the Palestinian side. My problem is, what everybody keeps saying as the alternative is, well, a two-state solution. And if you just say two-state solution, at this point, when it has been displayed, demonstrated repeatedly, peace is not something that comes naturally to either side right now. Given all the bad blood that goes back at least 100 years, if not more than 100 years, if people want to think this started in 1948 with how the territory was divided amongst the two sides, you'll be sadly mistaken. It started way before that. This is where the implementation issues continue. It actually starts with, I believe, the American president, and again, I don't know exactly what his solutions would mean on a detailed level, but to just say, well, America will go in, is that the best thing to do? There are practical benefits to one nation handling it as opposed to a coalition, because getting more decision makers involved slows down response times, as many areas of Europe is finding out. But the flip side is, when you need something that the world and the people on the ground will have confidence in, you want as many partners as possible to reinforce the fact that, listen, we are not playing around. We mean this, and we are determined to ensure that peace is here, and it helps when you have a coalition. But just saying two-state solution doesn't actually go to the heart of the problem, where we've reached the point it's not even necessarily about territory. And I think that's what a lot of people understand. Yeah, that's what they say. But long before it was an issue about who wants to remove who from what territory, it really comes down to the fact that for whatever reason, neither side could suffer the other to exist. That is true for the Hamas side, and to some extent those Palestinians that support Hamas. To what extent has that gotten to the point where it is true for the Israeli side and for some of the civilians who support extreme measures? That's what is harder to know, but for the most part, you can't say that it's not there. And how are you just going to expect, oh, well, we'll declare two states? This is something that politicians around the world have been trying to negotiate with these two sides since, what, the 90s, the 80s, the 70s. I think the last significant war might have been in the 70s. Significant war, Israel and its neighbors. Meanwhile, Palestine, for the most part, is just caught in the middle of the dynamics of the politics. And now they have reached a point where they themselves are not really helping themselves. People on the ground are willing to work together. Israelis and Palestinians are willing to work and live together. The problem is the political dynamic has shown time and time again that it won't be allowed to happen. Someone is going to light a match to set off the powder keg. It's just a matter of when, not if. So where leaders that want to decry the American president's solution, again, I have no problem saying that it has holes or it's not practical. But you need to come up with something better, not something that is ineffective, which is probably why he proposed, that is Trump, what he proposed in the first place. He's proposing an alternative. If it's worse, fine, but let's analyze the situation for what it is, not just go back to the default nonsense. Yes, the goal, the end goal is a two-state solution, but how do you get there? Because for a two-state solution to work, both sides need to want peace, and politically, both sides don't seem to want peace. Neither side seems to want peace. And at some point, we need to stop trying to think that man's default state of being is to sing kumbaya and to be happy with everybody, because that is not the case. Think about your own organization. How many workplaces, how many amateur groups, non-profit entities, after-school activities, homeowners association if you're abroad, or gated communities if you live in TNT. How many group of people do you know is absolutely conflict-free and perpetually remains that way? At least not without serious work, which at times there will always be somebody wanting to do some stupidness. Think about it. Now, add the history of violence and the bad blood and the hard feelings of violence and reprisals of over 100 years, and tell me, do you expect human nature in this case to be one of peace? Not without something to break the cycle in a tangible way? And until we see that, as much as you and myself will look at Donald Trump and his suggestion as somewhat skeptical, I can't necessarily look at the people who are criticizing him, the world leaders, and say, oh, well, yeah, they know what they're doing, and they have the better solution. They don't. This has been tried before, and it's failed time and time again. But like I said before, no one has the belly to actually do what must be done, and that is to figure out a way to forcibly separate the two sides while maintaining their rights as individual sovereign states. That takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of expertise. That will require a lot of great men and women. I don't know if we have that in 2025 to do an undertaking quite like that. But perhaps if we figure it out, it will be an indicator that humanity is one step closer to real enlightenment and advancement. Meanwhile, something closer to home, just want to mention this. A couple of days ago, there was the funeral for the 3-year-old who died in that arson case. Minister of Public Utilities and MP for Lopino, Bonnet West, Marvin Gonzalez, he was there, and he pointed to the fact, and this is something that we need to be reminded of again and again, that fathers need to step up to their responsibility. We lament the fact that we don't have the village, although to some extent, maybe some communities away from the large rural and highly developed suburban areas still have that. But he's saying, your responsibility does not end when you impregnate our mothers. Your responsibility starts when that child enters the womb and comes into the world. To some extent, I would say it starts when impregnation occurs to some extent. The mother needs to have a certain degree of extra care to help bring the child into the world. But for the most part, yes, the responsibility of fathers, you know, if you're not with the woman, fine. Once that child is born. Now, there are greater debates with regards to the rights of parenting and who gets to say that the pregnancy is going forward and the pregnancy is not going forward, and then how all of that is treated. And there are some jurisdictions that kind of get it wrong when they have fathers paying child support when they are not the biological fathers and the biological fathers are found. But we're not here to discuss all of that. At the end of the day, it all comes back down to the fact that, look, if you don't want to be a daddy, there are things that you should do from the start to not be a daddy. Case in point, don't have intimate partners recklessly. That's all. That's all that it takes. For the most part, it's not guaranteed. And then be willing to accept the consequences that occur. But more importantly, I think Minister Gonzalez was speaking to the people who did not have an issue with being fathers. They're just not being fathers. It's not a question of if they want to be a father or not. For whatever reason, they're just not good at being fathers, even if in some cases they're in the household. And this is nothing new. This is things that goes on. Some fathers really, they're not supposed to be fathers, or they're not prepared to be fathers, or they're not willing to be fathers. But you can't just assume that the mother is going to nurture and take care of and teach and be the sole parent for the child while you go off and be the man. And the lack of a parental father figure who can offer things that a mother figure can't. Yes, we celebrate all the single mothers who manage to do it. Not because it is easy, but because it is hard. But because it is not supposed to be the way to do it. So when they succeed, it is a testament to their perseverance, determination, to their good character, skill. And why should other women then be forced into situations like that when they have to do it alone? The minister is saying, no, 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 let's not do that. Let's not. In part, just so that there could be two parents in a household. I will always remember what a friend of mine says. When he remarried and had a wife that supported him and his children, it made all the difference in the world to him. And I would imagine that the reverse would be very much true, because I have seen friends where the fathers did not live up to their responsibilities, and the reverse and the inverse happened, where such a burden was then placed on the mother. It made life unnecessarily hard not having the support of the other parent. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go into maybe one of the topics of the daily review. There's a lot to unpack with regards, again, with the continuing saga of the Commissioner of Police, but we won't stick on that fully today. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WESN. I'm Sean Michael Small. We'll be right back after this.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience.
Give us a call at 235-5479
for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, now is the time we'll go into the daily review. All right, there's a lot to unpack with regards to what's the current state of the Commissioner of Police. So with today's first story, we'll just go, and it might be the only one, we'll just go with the outcome of Airlink with Christopher's legal challenge. Essentially, there were two things that she tried to accomplish through the courts. She did get permission to challenge the Police Service Commission's authority to suspend her in light of the ongoing investigation, right? But she was not able to convince the court to keep the office of the commissioner vacant. And I do believe that this is the right call, because to some extent, while I understand that, or I believe, based on what is known publicly, I believe that despite all my criticisms of Earl Christopher, the process of how she's being treated is not the correct one, right? But at the end of the day, the country cannot go without a commissioner. And I think this is where the court is saying, listen, we understand you have a legal challenge. And in some things, you know, you could leave the situation, the status quo as is. You could freeze it. You could leave the situation open or vacant. Or you could maybe even compel that the status quo be returned to what it was until we determine the legitimacy of your case. But this is not that. And depending on how long this would take, the country cannot go for days, much less weeks or months, without a commissioner of police. And I think what makes it tenable is the fact that it's an acting commissioner. Earla's not being replaced substantially, at least not before her contract is up. And she could technically get all of her back paid depending on the outcome of the case. And I think the court is basically saying that. Now, with regards to the damage of her reputation, keeping the commissioner's seat vacant of anybody acting in the position, I don't think is really going to improve her reputation or help deal with the emotional damages to any significant degree that will offset the issue of not having an acting commissioner of police. So I do think that the court got it right in this case. As a layman, based on what we've seen, because there's the practical necessity of, at the end of the day, you know, we're not talking about a clerk and we could compel the organization to leave that clerk seat open or something like that. No, we're talking about the commissioner of police during the state of emergency, right? And if I want to kind of be a little bit more silly or maybe speculative or extreme or to even go further than where the court should go, right? One could argue, to what extent was she effectively managing the police service during the SO in the first place anyway? Not that it should necessarily be something pertinent for the court to consider, but in the court of public opinion, for the seat to remain vacant or for her to be allowed to return to be commissioner, to what extent, on a practical level, is that beneficial as compared to the alternative, which we'll speak about on another day. But the other part of this that I wanted to get to, which I do find I have some issue with, if not a lot of issues with. Deborah Peake, Senior Counsel representing the Police Service Commission, rejected Pamela Elder's argument, maintaining that the Commission had the constitutional power to suspend the Commissioner when there was sufficient suspicion of misconduct, saying that the Service Commission does not need to prove guilt, but it must be satisfied that an offense may have been committed. Well, hold on, time out. I understand that this may be so, but I actually think that this may become the case study of why that level of subjectivity is being taken too far and should not be allowed. Because the level of suspicion, it should at least be reasonable. Because essentially then, potentially, all it would take is one of Junior Benjamin's subordinates to say, well, I think he did something bad. And then what? The Police Service Commission going to suspend him too? Because what is the threshold, right? What is the point where you will suspend versus when you won't suspend? And then, of course, now, we could go to, do we apply that level, that level of judgment, right, on others, or is it only just the Police Service Commission with regards to the Commissioner? What about Suzette Martin? There's reasonable suspicion that something wrong happened with regards to the Brent Thomas affair. She was promoted. Granted, okay, fine, she was promoted, not by you. There was a whole other Police Service Commission involved, and Parliament approved of her promotion. But I do believe that case is still before us, is it not? And one could argue that the circumstances in the public sphere with regards to that situation implies that there's far more fire there, not just smoke, than with regards to earlier with Christopher. And yet they're not looking to do anything. And I'm not saying that they should suspend Suzette Martin. What I am saying is that it seems as though they are literally taking a degree of subjectivity to the extreme. Because the DPP is basically saying, well, we can't charge her with what you'll have. So how is that reasonable suspicion? That's point number one. Point number two, could someone from the Police Service Commission please tell me exactly what potential law did Erla break? I would like to see that. They're saying that the Police Service Commission had to act swiftly to protect the integrity of the office. I'm sorry, but they are potentially contributing to this fiasco. What they're doing, I don't think, is solely protecting the integrity of the office. It is making the whole situation, including their role in it, look, as time goes on and information is not forthcoming, it makes the whole situation look like a political joke. So how is this protecting the integrity of the office? What it looks like to me is that they moved a little too fast and now they can't turn back the clock, they can't unring the bell. And to some extent, I hope, because I'm not saying that there's nothing there, but they need to be willing to, they need to have something, right? So I hope that potentially Pamela Elder may, because this matter, I believe, is going forward in the courts, basically asked everybody involved, what law are you saying my client broke? We need to start with that. Now, maybe they know and they won't ask the question, but it's not for us to know. In which case, unfortunately, the lack of transparency, no matter how justified, given what you have given us, it's not good enough. It's not. Because it's not just members of the public. It's police officers also looking at this situation and being disgusted with it. It's reported in the press. Police officers on condition of anonymity. They have said it. Guy Griffith also has come out and decried this whole situation, as well as Stephen Williams. This is more and more looking like a fishing expedition. And the fact that the Police Service Commission is going to act based on a fishing expedition, well, I take issue on that if that bears out to be the truth. And then now, I'll have to go with the standards that I've set before. How independent is this? And how capable is this Police Service Commission if that proves to be the case, that they're just willing to make a drastic decision off of a fishing expedition? All right, let's end it there. There's more stories on this topic, but we'll get to that tomorrow. Let's take a break. We'll welcome our guests. We're going to switch gears back to a topic from last week that's very important. Stay tuned. This is Talking Point on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
I am Dr. Delphina Ovid, your friendly neighborhood dentist. At Community Hospital Dental Clinic, we offer examinations which include x-rays, basic oral cancer screening, and a treatment plan. We also offer cleanings, fillings, extractions, root canal treatment, and complete and partial dentures. Remember, you don't have to brush and floss all your teeth, just the ones you want to keep.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movie Town, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
I'm back here on Talking About WSN, the content capital. Sean Michael Small here, welcoming my guest. He is an old friend. He is the new old friend, or the old new friend. Either way, we are still, you see us now and again on Breakthrough. Last couple of weeks, we started back, season 3. And of course, he is here with us today. Not only our arts and culture commentator, but also a music educator, pertinent to today's topic, Mark Anthony Peter. Good morning. Welcome back to Talking Point, and welcome back for the new year.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, it's been a while. It's been a hot minute since I've been on Talking Point. So yes, Happy New Year to those who watch Talking Point. Hi.
So, with that said, one of the things that I have said is a lot of the problems we have, we're not going to solve it if we don't solve some of the underlying issues with our politics and our public service. And if I was to put a roadmap, the first thing I would do is clean up the public service with regards to their HR practices and redundancies and stuff like that. That could save us some money. Then the second step I said is, once you clean that up, you go to education. And I said to the point of specifically primary education, because it seemed as though the foundation for a lot of our students was really bad. We've gotten reports from some teachers, I think maybe last year, the year before, where they had students coming into Form 1 when they couldn't even, they lacked basic skills. And it was like, how do you even send these students to secondary school when they're lacking basic literacy? But now it's come out, and I think this is a dirty secret that everybody knows, but nobody really spoke about on the level that it did a couple of weeks ago. that how many teachers in public schools, they collect a check, but they don't actually teach when they are contracted to teach so that they could charge extra lessons. And this situation, you independent of any discussion I had of this with callers and with other people I'm talking about, you put this forward to me last week, and I thought, yes, this is something that I don't want to get off of. You're closer your time in the education system than I am. That's number one. Number two, you have actually been a teacher, right? Both outside and inside of schools. So yes. What do you make of all of this? First off, because you also speak and interact with a lot of students, so you might even have it from their perspective as well. What do you make of this?
Yes. So, first things first. If it's one sector that you don't want to piss off, it is the education sector. That's first things first. However, I'm going to give my experience as a student, not as a teacher. First thing. So when I was in secondary school, I went to a particular teacher for extra lessons. And this person was not in my school. This was out of my school, right? But they also taught in a different school. Now, there was a rumor floating around that this particular teacher did not give their best or as much as they gave in their lessons at school, right? And then over time, you know, when you're in lessons class, you become friends with people and you become friends with the students from that school. And so a group of my friends, and we asked, is it true that they don't teach well, or they withhold, according to Senator Richards here, withholding the curriculum? Or is it that, do they not teach and then come here to teach? And some of these students from that school confirmed it because they were in their class, that teacher's class in the school. I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's a little bit unfair, because I thought, what about the students who are attending your classes in school who cannot necessarily afford to do your lessons to have to learn? So now we're in this position where we need to pay extra for the lessons because you refuse to teach. Now, granted, there are reasons that people go to lessons. It's very important. But if it's under the circumstances that you don't teach in your own school and then give a lot more when you're running your private business, then that becomes a little bit questionable.
I think that's the thing. If you have an extra lessons class where the majority of the students you don't teach during the day, and yes, you could have some of the students that you teach during the day, but it's the case of, well, these are the students that really need the help, right? And you know, you speak to the parents, you say, well, look, I do have an extra lessons class. That's where I do the after school work if you want to do that, right? But potentially, you know, as long as there are mechanisms within the system for the teacher, that the teacher is trying to address the problems, I don't have a problem with extra lessons. It just feels as though, and this is I guess this is the underlying point. Education is supposed to be free, but perhaps when the government touts, oh, we have this literacy rate, and we know that there are illiterate adults among us who would have gone through the common entrance system at this point, right? It's not as though we're in the 1960s or the 1940s or whenever, and they have generations that didn't go through the current or a version of the current education system. And, you know, when the government wants to say, well, education is free up to tertiary, it's like, is it really free? Is it really free if extra lessons needs to be paid for? Now, I, at times, did extra lessons mainly in primary school, where not the whole class was there. It didn't seem like it was more like, well, the parents wanted the kids to stay on, finish their homework under supervision, and not have to pick them up so early. And I kind of get that. If that's the model, it is the model. The whole class wasn't there. So this whole situation, but I've seen in private primary schools, this phenomenon happen as well, or I've heard of it, which makes me wonder to what extent now is this something that is essentially, you know, you see one person do it, you see another person do it, and all of a sudden everybody, it starts to become more and more acceptable, and more people are doing it, and it's going to undermine the whole point of the education system. Because part of it, Mark, is you can't have children in schools from 7:30 or 8 a.m. till 5, 6 p.m. And in case of some primary schools, or a primary school, I heard that that was the case. The lessons were going late because the whole day of teaching was wasted. I don't know if you've heard of anything similar to that, whether private or public.
It's not that I've heard anything, I've experienced that. So we have to understand what are the circumstances under which lessons happen, and what are the circumstances under which a student has to go through lessons. So for me, as I've expressed before, learning through the traditional way of learning did not work for me, right? What I realized, I have to internalize a lot of things. What I have to do is experience things. I don't learn by telling. I can't, it's very difficult for me to learn by telling. If you're just going to tell me, then you're going to have to repeat it at least 10, 15, 20 times, all right? Or I'm going to have to repeat it to myself that amount of times, right? So you mentioned at what cost is this happening? Well, it is at the cost of how our students learn, because how outdated is the way we teach? How outdated is the curriculum, right? We have students who are growing up not only with learning disabilities and in neurodiversity situations, but we're talking about children who can barely, I don't know, keep their attention span long enough to concentrate because of the growing social media environment, right? So their way of learning, their way of lifestyle, and their way of existing is changing rapidly. But is the education system, is the way teachers are we making the necessary adjustments to cater for their learning, so that when they fall behind in school itself, they have no choice but to do the extra lessons, right? So there's that. Yes, it does assist with the doing the homework and stuff like that. And if you're in a case where a parent works late and they can't help but work late, and there's no other way for the child to get home, or to any other close family member that's close by to the school, then I mean, school becomes a second home. You know, school is an entire, what's the word I'm looking for? School is an entire ecosystem. And with an entire ecosystem, there are many, many varying factors. All right? So think about, let's put it into some perspective. Think about a school that is not receiving the necessary government funds on time. Think of a school that does not have the necessary resources to, because how many, like within the last 5 years, how many schools have we heard of? The roof collapsed, the air conditioner is not working, the walls are, something is happening where infrastructurally it's just not a conducive place for learning, right? So that's already a disadvantage to the students of that school. Then we have to think about the behavior of the students, right? Are the classes made up of 90% of good children who pay attention and 10% of children who are disruptive, or is it the flip? And that's gonna hold back the process of learning, right? And then that's a lot of pressure on our teachers as well, because I don't think I've ever been in a standard or a form, whether primary or secondary school, where a teacher did not say us, you know, there isn't enough time to finish the curriculum. There absolutely isn't. And I think that's just the reality that some teachers face. So on top of that, then think about how the school is run. Think about all of the events that happen in these schools. Think about all of the extracurriculars that happen in these schools. Most of the time they happen during school hours, especially in primary schools, more specifically in primary schools, right? So all of these things, and then somebody might say, well, then reduce the amount of things, reduce the amount of extra things so that there can be more learning. However, is that a balanced school life? Is it only going to be about academics and books or whatever? The children have to go outside. They have to do PE. They have to run. They have to play. They have to do art. They have to do music. All right? But the thing is, and then it comes back to a whole other thing of these things that I called being extra add-ons as opposed to part of the holistic curriculum that could potentially aid the student's development, the child's development. So, and then again, back to the diversity of the delivering the curriculum. You don't always recognize when somebody is dyslexic, right? So it's very difficult to not only just monitor, but to cater to that student. And then you know we leave it up to the parents, but the parents are not always able to recognize those things, right? You and I grew up in a time where if they didn't learn this stuff, they were just called lazy, or they were just called disconnected from what's happening, right? So there are many, many varying factors about lessons, but they're different. But the thing is, this is something that has to happen because of the varying factors that I just described.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always, from my experiences, when a student falls behind, there's a vicious cycle where they're discouraged because they're not able to keep up. So they fall further behind, and then they're further discouraged to try to get back to keeping up with the rest of the class. So they fall further behind, and it keeps going until one boy in my year tried to drop out, and his school took a lot of effort to find out where he was. In Form 5, he tried to get a job and drop out of school, and they encouraged him to come back. And I don't know to what extent they were able to really solve the problem. I do appreciate that they were trying to, and they were trying to do the right way, or at least they had the right intention. I don't know if they were able to find the right method. And I think in a lot of these cases, that what you're telling me, it's not just the right method to teach, but I also want to know about the right method of assessment. But because consider this, there are legitimate reasons for extra lessons, right? You and I could agree on that. Not every, some of it is in good faith, whether it is, you know, just an after-school program for your kids, not necessarily to learn, but just to do homework and just to kind of, you know, supervise them until the parents are ready to pick them up, or a legitimate means to give extra instruction. So here's the thing. I don't think we could outright ban it, right?
No.
Because those legitimate needs won't be met. So then now, here's my question to you. Should teachers have to earn the right to give extra lessons? Because the basic premise in my head is, well, the good teachers who could prove themselves as good teachers will then also, through their skill and effort, you could be at least a bit more confident they're teaching in class. So if they need to give extra lessons, it's legitimate. It's not because they want to pad their paycheck. But then the question comes now, how do you assess that? Because it can't just be results alone, because there could be good teachers who are trying, and for whatever reason, their class is potentially falling behind because they're not good at the curriculum for whatever reason, right? And you could get situations like that where he might need to actually, you know, they fall behind and then they don't have enough time to finish the curriculum. He might need to actually tell all the students, hey, we need to do extra lessons. Now, depending, maybe you could vary how much is being charged or not charged at all in situations like that. I know in tertiary level, we weren't charged extra, right, for extra classes, for makeup classes when we got to that point. But all of these things on how we assess teachers, I think, is perhaps maybe something that might come up in this situation. Because if we could assess teachers and say, reasonably, these are the good teachers. So if they say, I need to give these students extra lessons, or they're willing to give extra lessons to students outside of their school, we could be confident, hey, this is good. Whereas if we could objectively find a way to say, these teachers are not really doing much in their class, they shouldn't be allowed to give extra lessons because that's ridiculous that they're essentially coasting during their 8 to 3 or their 7:30 to 2 when they should be working. Would you agree with that?
I think it will become, it can become complicated because, going back to my experience as well, the person did not give extra lessons in the school. They gave extra lessons at their home. So are you going to come in and I don't know, that's their private home, that's their private business, right? But I think if it comes down to the management, if a principal or a manager or supervisor or something gets wind of information like this, I think it's worth investigating. I think it's worth speaking to the teacher, getting feedback from students, getting feedback from parents. You know, this is something that I see that is happening. This is something that I've heard. You know, there is something that happens in UE where you have to, well, not have to anymore, but you have the option of filling out a lecture evaluation, right? Coming down closer to the end of the semester, end of the teaching era. Now, but the way these feedback forms sort of work is if there's a class of 50 and only 5 people write feedback, and only 5 of those people have negative feedback about that, but the other 45 didn't fill out the form at all, it's very difficult to take action when there's nothing in terms of this class ratio. There's nothing to compare those specific feedbacks to, because that could be the 5 of y'all, that could be your personal experience, but the other 45 could probably be great, right? So it's important to always get. So I brought that up because it's important to always get feedback from parents, from students, etc. There needs to be there needs to be, like, it's hard because how do you manage someone's morals, right? When somebody chooses to hold back. And then but then the next thing is, like, in the coming back to my situation again, like that lessons they were a great teacher, right? They were great in the lessons and you learned in the lessons. So it's like you kind of put the students in a sort of predicament, because if in the school you're not teaching, but in the lessons you're teaching great, then the people, especially if your lessons is filled with a lot of students outside of the school that you teach at, well, it's different because remember it's a private business. It's in their home, so different schools in their area are coming. So how do you, like, you can't, it's very difficult to now punish those students who are paying their money and are getting a good education and are seeing the benefits of the lessons because of the teacher. So it becomes a slippery slope. But what I want to say is address the things that have the resources to support teachers in schools, so that in the case of learning disabilities, in the case of neurodivergency, in the case of unstable homes, that affects learning as well, in the case of moods, of mental illness, of all of those things, have the resources to support the teachers. Granted, we do not have it to support all of these schools, but we need to figure out a way for those resources to be accessible.
Well, stick a pin on that, because I'll just say this. My proposal will allow for that same teacher to give extra lessons, but it will be lessons for mostly for the students that he doesn't teach in his own class, right?
Okay.
So he could still have that avenue, 1, to earn an extra income, and 2, for students who maybe they don't have as good a teacher of him in their class to get instructions from a better teacher like him. The thing is, I don't think there's a way to do it for private schools, except the private schools themselves should be able to say, why are you not teaching in class? We have a contract for you to teach, AKA, right? You're not supposed to be competing against yourself and undermining the product that we are supposed to be providing. So they should be able to deal with their teachers on their own. In a similar way, for public schools, I do think it's a similar thing. Like you said, teachers who are not teaching should be investigated. And essentially, that could be the basis of any sort of policy of who gets to do extra lessons or not. And the idea would be to basically to put in the work to figure out a way to bar teachers who are not teaching in class from giving extra lessons, not to bar teachers blanket from giving extra lessons. I think that would be the difference, and it would be potentially a positive incentive to be better in class. So then if I want to have extra lessons and the extra income, I'll get that. But going back to what you said about the support, because one of the issues that is being faced, not just here, but around the world in some areas, is teacher shortages. And it could also be shortages of support personnel. with regards to how do you assess for the various educational, not deficiencies in the students, but rather the learning styles, I guess you could say. Because it's not necessarily outright disability. Some of it is, but some of it is just, you know, little Timmy learns better some other way, regardless of having a formal condition or not. And assessing that for better teaching, to some extent, needs staff. Now, the money side about it, that's difficult, but I did say earlier, if we could figure out proper HR practices and reward merit, we could kind of get rid of the redundancy. Maybe there's some redundancy in education with the staff and the Ministry of Education not actually providing benefits to the students. But one of the things with regards to the working pool in the shortfall, ironically, I think I brought it up because I was told with vocational schools there's a shortfall of students. So the theory is, you know, well, if we bring in foreign teachers on a short-term basis, they could teach a couple generations of students, get some graduates who could then, some of them could turn around and become the teachers of the subsequent generations. To some extent, I used the music programs and music graduates as an example. That's happening with the music programs as well, correct? Graduates are becoming teachers.
Yes, yes, of course, because you were educated not just on the subject, but you were educated on the skill of teaching as well, right? So you at least for me, I was exposed to lecturers who love to teach, lecturers who took the time and explained why I am teaching you this way, right? Lecturers who understood. I remember one particular lecture, she understood how much the current education system did not benefit us or prepare us enough to be not academic students, but human beings in a university setting. Because the irony is, when you're in primary school, when you're in secondary school, you're asking questions, you're talking, and you're told to shut up. But then when you reach in university and an open discussion is necessary for the learning, mum's the word.
Yeah.
You get silence, you get crickets, right? So there's a huge I think I remember saying this some time ago, because I, having gone through CSEC as well as CAPE and then going to university, with those three levels, I experienced a huge disconnect. Like the leaps would, maybe that's just how it is, but the leap from one level to the other was greater than I expected, was greater than what I was told it was going to be, because, you know, as early as Form 1, like they told you, we're preparing you for university life. So I'm like, oh, we now reach, like, give me a chance. But okay, we went along with it. We're preparing you for university life. This is the amount of work that you have to do, etc., etc., etc. That's fine. Then you go to sixth form, and you're like, hold on. I do not feel prepared at all. At all. Even after graduating from Cape. I'm not ready. And then when you get to university, it's like everything that I learned to do to survive in secondary school, I had to unlearn, because those were the necessary skills to exist in university. Having an open mind and not just following instructions. Being able to have an open dialogue and give feedback without fear of getting in trouble, without fear of being told you talk too much, without fear of I don't know, hurting somebody's feelings, as simple as that may sound, right? So then there was that, as I said, there was that unlearning experience happening there. So it's through those experiences, I think, for me especially, that inspired me to teach on any sort of level, because it's like it sucks. It's not the greatest. It's not the greatest system.
Would you say that the jump between stages, primary to secondary surgery, was so much greater than the jump between years? So in a stage, it was like you were moving at a snail's pace, and then you had to accelerate for the next stage. once you finish secondary school, you weren't necessarily advancing that fast throughout secondary school. But then once you got to sixth form, you had to make a jump.
Yeah, I think the years within the stages were fine. It's the jumping from the stage to jumping from CSEC to Cape, and then Cape to university. So like Form 1 to 5, that transition was fine as far as I can remember.
But
because when I jumped from Form 5 to Form 6, then I realized, oh, okay, no problem. And then from Form 6 to university, it's like, oh,
well then
I need to learn a different set of skills.
The question would be, right, is it that, would you say that we need to fundamentally rethink what is being taught or how students are being taught with regards to what skills they develop between primary and secondary school to prepare them to university? Or is it that we just need to expand things more in the middle so that the leap at the end isn't too drastic, so that we maybe challenge students more from Form 1, 2, 3, 4, as opposed to, all right, now that you finish CSEC, go to tertiary education and hope for the best that they are able to keep up?
I think we need to expand on how we think, because and rethink the preparation process, because when you're drilled academically, when you get to university, it's almost like the academic part is a little bit easier than the when I say the academic part, the written academic part is easier. But when it comes to the dialogue academic part, when it comes to the research academic part, when it comes to the engaging in conversation and in discussion, then that becomes, I feel like that's a little bit, I mean, based on my experience, that was a little bit neglected. Granted, I was a little bit older than my classmates, and it was still a little bit rough for me, because after CSEC, I kind of took a year off, but also repeated some subjects privately, and then went to sixth form, because I had a plan, but the plan changed, right? But we still went to sixth form because we had to, right? And then when we went through sixth form, it was 2 years of my life. And then I took another year off. I said, I am tired. So then I took that year off to explore the music, because I was a science student before, right? I took that year off to explore the music. So it's probably like already 20, 21, somewhere around there, which is somewhere around where you met me or something like that. And then I decided to go and pursue the certificate in music at UEDCFA. So I was already older than most of my classmates. So technically I was an adult that had to engage in university level academic discussions, so it was a little bit easier for me because I was an adult. Had I done it at the age of most of my classmates, where they came straight from CSEC, I might not have had such an easy time. It probably would have been a little bit rough for me, because as a teenager, you're still stuck in that sort of teenage bubble, that CSEC bubble. But me being involved in as many extracurriculars as I was, me being a practicing musician, even from the age of 16, so I was experiencing the outside world a little bit early. That sort of gave me an advantage to engage in the university level type of things. But I noticed that for some, because they were younger, it was a little bit rough. So I think we need to rethink. We need to rethink how we see education on a whole, because I would recommend a year off to anybody, because straight years of schooling, for 14 years, straight years of schooling, could be a little bit taxing on the brain, depending on who you are, depending on how you think, depending on how your brain works, right? Depending on how your personality works as well. Because how many university students go into university, it's been school all of the time, and then they come out, they graduate, and now they have to face life. They have to face the realities of life.
I don't just agree with what you just said about taking a break. I actually wonder, because I did university both after Form 6 as well as later on, because I didn't finish my first degree until, I had to hit a pause and I didn't go back to it until I was late in the game, right? So I was in a very unique situation, maybe even more unique than yours, and I was a much better student going through all of what I went through and going back at 29, 30, something like that. I was a much better student then. I had a better appreciation of the material. Now, it was a business degree, so having work experience was very directly pertinent and beneficial, yes. But also, I think to some extent it was beneficial because, yes, I did work in the family business, but it was at an entry-level position where I got to enjoy none of the perks of being senior, but I still had some of the responsibilities. So ironically, I did kind of feel the pull a bit from both ends, right? And that helped me tremendously when I went to finish off my BBAs with Roytech. And I do think perhaps you're right, not just to have a break, because a break, if irresponsible, could be a detriment, but also maybe to have a break, maybe you get a part-time job. It doesn't have to be in your field, just to get a little bit of work experience to start you on that path, if the labor market will allow for it. That's a whole other conversation, that'll take too long. And then now you get a little bit of work experience. It doesn't have to be a full-time job. Just earn a little bit of spending money so you're not a drain on your parents while you're on a break. Get a little bit of work experience. Maybe advance. Maybe you take a couple years. Because I actually think it might be beneficial for people to get their degree at 24, 25, 26 than at 19, 20, 21. Outside of medical degrees, that's a whole different level of fish, right? Yeah. But yeah, so that you're a bit more mature when you go into university. You still have work experience, because right now there are people debating on even bothering with university education in North America, saying that work experience and work experience in your field is so much more important, depending on how the labor market perceives things, than the paper, because we reach a point where a lot of people are the paper, but then they're not capable at the job, and some people get nonsense degrees that they don't figure out how to apply to the working world, right? And that's a whole other issue. But going back to the initial topic, I want to close here.
Right.
When we have this vicious trap now, where there are going to be students who can't afford the extra lessons, or they can't afford all the extra lessons they need if this problem is allowed to fester and grow. I mean, this may seem like a low-hanging fruit question, an obvious question, but really and truly, should we then basically consider they have almost no chance going to the tertiary level? Because right now, our system is one-dimensional, and that's where we tell people that they have to go, and when they don't get there, they are essentially stigmatized like failures, academically. And then they are left to do whatever nonsense jobs they could get. Low-paying minimum wage jobs that they could get, because we can't deal with the people where the system doesn't work for. And it seems as though we're going to probably run into this problem more and more as time goes on. What do you say to that?
I would say to that, there is the potential there for them to be left behind. However, I don't think it's a totally lost cause, because I know of many community centers, many community organizations, be it churches and stuff like that, having this sort of, this sort of free homework centers, that they call it, where, tutors who are actual teachers, educators, decide to give up their time free of charge to help these students, help the children in their community. We need a little bit more of that, and it's a little bit difficult to do that because of it's very difficult to tell somebody that they should volunteer their time, because that should be a choice that they make, because they have to assess the level of income, the level of expenses. Is this something that I can give of myself that, and I'm willing to take the risks? Because, I mean, a lot of these things are community funded, right? There's nothing from the government, right? So the neighborhood, you call on the neighborhood to to, you know, especially if you're teaching primary school children, in these homework centers, you're calling the neighborhood to say, you know, we need, if you can commit to some sandwiches or some drinks one of the days in the week so that the children can be fed, because the reality is some of them don't get fed, right? Or they need something to eat at that point in time. If you need, and then you have the tutors themselves, who are themselves teachers, who are great teachers, who could open their own private practice for after school stuff and choose to have people pay, but they seem like their calling is elsewhere. It all comes down to, I think, again, as you mentioned, the one-dimensional way of education. We need to expand it a little bit. We need to reintroduce, maybe is the word I'm looking for, but not everyone knows the importance of education. And when they see certain things, especially young people, when they see certain things, certain celebrities making millions and millions of dollars, but again, at what cost? And what are they doing? And why are they doing that? And is that something that you want to do, right? You want to have your whole life plastered on social media? Do you want to, like, let's just look, you know, you could look at the award shows, you could look at all of the interviews, the sort of things that they're going through. They're also humans as well. But coming back to it, how important education is, how important knowledge is, how important learning itself is. We don't know. I think we're kind of losing the art of that, where we are now becoming this sort of task-oriented society, where it's like, get a good job, get a job that pays well, pay the bills, live, survive, whatever the case may be. But when you actually kind of, and I'm going to use the word, when you kind of humble yourself, and you are open to all of the academic knowledge that is out there, all of these stories, right? When we had grandparents that used to tell these stories of how they grew up, right? When you don't have that anymore, when you no longer have the multi-generational households anymore, you just, it reduces your scope of the world. And so then you move through life with this singular, this sort of monocular way of doing things. So of moving through the world. And then when you get to university, the university takes your view and does this. But if you're not equipped well enough to handle that shift, it could be a little bit overwhelming. So, yeah.
I mean, I'll close by agreeing with that point. I had a little bit the multi-generational household, but essentially all of my grandparents were passed away before I think I was even born, right, on a practical level, except maybe one who was estranged. We had some old aunties, but, you know, they were old, so I only had them until I was 8. And the generational divide and what they could have offered with regards to life lessons passing down. I didn't know my grandfathers. I barely know who they were or what they did. So I myself probably was that. I was very much like this. And then when I got to university the first time and I had to live this, you know, intelligence only helps so much. Some people are equipped because they have wisdom and maturity, and others don't. I have seen students smarter than me not be fully equipped but get by, and then I myself, arguably to some extent, I was crashing and burning my first go around in tertiary, and then compared to my second go around in tertiary. So I very much endorse what you just said, and it's a shame that that happens, and solving that in its entirety is way beyond the amount of time we have left for the show.
I know.
What we're going to do is we'll open up the phone lines now. You could call in and have your say. I know that this is somewhat of an old topic, but I didn't want it to die because I do feel, Mark, that education is actually, and I've said this before, it is probably the biggest problem we have that we're not speaking about. The biggest problem we have that is underestimated, that is overlooked, and we kind of just, you know, well, fix it, you know, like we just want someone to wave a wand and magically fix it. And what we don't understand is it doesn't, like crime, young people and their development doesn't wait for anyone. You know, if we waste time, we're not going to get it back. One of the callers last year or the year before, he said for young people involved in crime now, he's right to write them off because he doesn't think we have anything we could do to get them back on track to be productive members of society. And while I want to disagree with what he said, I have no solution to solve that problem, right? So I can't necessarily say that he's 100% wrong because I myself don't really know if we have the capacity to do it. We have Digger Martin on the line. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Good morning. I want to start on to the co-host, sorry about that, to start on why extra lessons. One of the mistakes we make, we try to impose our experience to guide other people. I think that is, for me, is a no-no. I don't do that. Now, there are three critical reasons, and I'm talking from experience, that why lessons are critical for people. The first one, meritocracy. If you want your child to do good, you have to understand where to go to get it. The second issue is the capacity of the child and the teacher. We have a lot of schools with teachers who do not or cannot teach. So the ministry has to fix that. And the third one, the ministry again. A lot of classes are left without teachers. So a parent like me have to mitigate all of that to make sure my child gets what is needed. Yeah. You, as a parent, have to understand all the variables the input variables to reach a desired goal. Now, quickly, I want to switch. And the other thing I want to switch is what Karen said yesterday. Karen said something yesterday was enlightening, and I always had a bad taste about Patrick Manning I have to say, continued with Keith Christopher Rowley with respect to politics. I think I changed my mindset on him, and I believe from what I'm heard from Karen yesterday, he was sincere not to put him, but because of special interest groups, he had to do it. His son, Mr. Bryan, has the ability to keep the man legacy going by not participating in a political coup and selecting a prime minister. So I'm hoping Brian Manning listens to me, and when the times come to sign that letter, let us keep the democratic process intact and do what is right to remove or pull back the country from total disaster. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. Well, Mark, I think what the caller basically gave in the first part was reasons why he thinks extra lessons has value and is needed. And I won't disagree, especially the last one that he said. There might be instances where there are some classes they don't have teachers for. I know I was told there was one situation, the speaker, it's a minor anecdote, they didn't have a social studies teacher for a primary school, I think it was. Like they just can't teach it because they don't have anyone to do so. And then what do you do? Now maybe in this case it's not as critical for SEA, but what if it was not having a math teacher or an English teacher?
Well, I know of a case where there was no social studies teacher in a secondary school. Why? Because, no teacher applied for it. And usually, if I'm not mistaken, when there is a post that has been vacant for a while within the Teaching Service Commission, you kind of have to, they either reappropriate it or they get rid of it, right? So it's one of those things where, and it's a well-known.
How do you get rid of a teaching position?
Yeah, well, something happens when it's vacant. I need to double check that, so don't quote me on that. But I know something happens where, if it's when I say for a long time, like maybe 10 plus years or something like that. The position kind of goes away. I remember one of my mentors saying, like, what would usually happen is you would apply on paper for a job, for a teaching job, so you'd be registered as, let's say, a maths teacher, but then in the actual school you teach. So you teach a different subject. So that's something that happens because it's something in the administrative system that kind of has to, especially when you don't have, because a music teacher is a new position, right?
Right.
In the context of how life goes, a music teacher is a very new position, right? So music teachers would sometimes, maybe they'd apply to be an English teacher or something like that, but teach music, and sometimes they would teach both, right? Because remember, at the time, music wasn't seen as a subject; it was
Yes.
seen as something extra,
Yes.
right? So these are the realities that happen. On the topic of teachers, though, a lot of these teachers, I need to mention, a lot of these teachers are overworked because a lot of students are being crammed into one classroom. Like, I remember being in a class where at least maybe 35 to 45 of us and one teacher. And I think I remember I was telling my family this. There was a cousin away, and, she was complaining about the teacher. And I said, granted, yes, how the teacher is dealing with it is a little bit unfair. But please keep in mind, you have one of your children at home. You have your child at home. We have 40 of your children in one space,
I mean,
right?
I hate to say this, but 40 does, in my experience, if you said there were 40 students in a class, I would, this might be the totally wrong thing to say. I'd be like, and so, because I think most of my classes in secondary school borderlined that, if not reached it. I think it was mostly in the mid-30s to high 30s of
Yeah, but
students.
that's, yeah,
until
so,
form,
but that's
until
not
form
really,
4, form 5.
right. So, but that's really, that shouldn't be the norm, because at one teacher can only handle so much, right? The ideal, I think, if it crosses 30 or 35, it becomes a bit much. And then again, it depends on the backgrounds of the students and how they behave in class, etc.
Here's a question to follow up on that. Do you think because teachers are overworked, this could be one, not necessarily condoning it, but it makes it a little bit more understandable? Why are they unwilling to teach? Now, it could be that they're teaching and it's not effective because there are too many students, right?
Mhm.
And they are putting in effort and it's just not working. But it could also be to the point where after, 5, 6 years, it's too hard. They don't know what to do, and they kind of, maybe not intentionally, but subconsciously, they kind of give up. And then they're like, if I have extra lessons, now at least the students, because the parents are paying, they have to be more willing to pay attention and not disrupt class. And I could get stuff done there, as opposed to I have 40 students. And I've seen students get out of control. When we had a substitute teacher in Fatima, pressure school, woo! Not that the teacher was a bad teacher. The students just, the social dynamic broke down. I don't know how else to explain it, because these are some of the same students that were perfectly behaved in other teachers' class. This was not a bad teacher, and yet things broke down, and, it fell apart, essentially. My maths class, Form 4 and Form 5, because of that. So do you think that perhaps the overcrowdedness, not saying that that was the reason for my situation, but the overcrowdedness could cause teachers now to just, it's not working, and that's why we have extra lessons?
I think so. I think there's something to be said about something as teaching, when you are in a job that you are passionate about, and I'd like to believe that most teachers are passionate about teaching and are passionate about learning. There have been 1 or 2 instances where I've heard teachers say they don't like children. I'm like, get a new job, because you're not helping the situation at all.
Just to clarify, you're saying people who are not called to this job, as much as we have a shortage of teachers, it might be better to not have them teach.
Or be like a teacher's assistant, or do something else within that you don't have, because you need to be passionate, or at least to the very least extent,
willing
a little bit what you're doing, and like the children, right? You may not.
You need to be willing, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Even if it's not you need to be willing to put all this effort in.
Yes. So when you're passionate about something and you're willing to put in all of this work, and then it feels like all of the odds are against you, there is a tendency for the subconscious to slowly and gradually shut down.
Yeah.
So this is not a teaching situation. Well, actually, it can be considered. I was in a situation once. I was in a teaching role in an organization, for a very long time. And some of these circumstances didn't allow for me to, and it's a musical setting, so one, I wasn't able to be creative, right? Two, I wasn't able to be, sometimes my time teaching would be wasted because even though I was hired to do this thing, the superior would sort of come in, dismantle everything, and do it again, right? So then it's like, wipe that smile off your face. So then it feels like a situation. So then, but then what I experienced was, okay, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do the things that I have to do, and if circumstances change, oh well, I just kind of have to accept it. But then slowly, I became sad. I became a little bit discouraged. I became slowly, I didn't feel like myself.
Yeah.
Right? And so people saw that in how I interacted with them. People saw it in how I taught. People saw it in how I organized certain things. And that can affect you. I don't know what the answer is to that because I don't know how, like, how do you come back from that? How do you have to deal with that when when, especially being a musician, an artist, a creative at heart, and you're not able to be creative, then it's like, this is not what I wanted.
I will close by saying, Mark, it's actually not limited to music. It is an HR thing, because even if you have an office job, there are still ways for creativity to help with regards to innovate new solutions, with regards to showing personal initiative, to find new solutions, or to execute things in a more effective manner, to have personal initiative. Like, creativity is not, is a valuable tool in the workplace when properly understood and properly utilized. And also, things like that, just with motivation of workers, that happens like that across the board, I would imagine. And then it's a question of a combination of leadership from management, but also leadership from within the employees, believe it or not, right? Internal leadership of that collective, but then also the internal perspective of the individual and what could be done for them to understand the perspective of when things are necessary and when things should be fixed and how they could be done. And sometimes in the workplace, it might be a no-win situation, unfixable situation, and that's when a healthy labor market will allow employees to move on to a better situation, because there are limits to what an employee should accept, just like there are limits to what an employer should accept. But we'll have to, so I won't limit it to just teaching or to just music. But it's very much, we have directly identified how it happens in teaching. So thanks to our caller. Thanks, Mark, for joining me to have, we always have good discussions that I enjoy. Hopefully the audience enjoyed it as well.
Hopefully. Yes, hopefully.
And I think so too. This is actually an important issue that we will probably be coming up on Talking Point, and maybe even to some extent from the art side on Breakthrough.
On Breakthrough, yes, for sure.
More than, it's not going to end here. It's going to come up more often, and we look forward to the conversations.
For sure.
Just would like to close by saying this to Mr. Digger Martin. I will say this. From my understanding, Brian Manning has not had an easy go at it because of his family name. Politics is ugly. The same thing that made it difficult for Mr. Manning to divest himself from Dr. Keith Rowley, whether for good or for bad, also plays out in other areas of the political environment, for good and for bad. And I say for good not because I have anecdotes, but because I don't want to be an absolutist, I'm leaving the door open, but most of the examples I have are for bad. It's an ugly business. Office politics is never pretty. Why would we accept or expect politics on a larger scale to somehow be more ethical? Unfortunately, to some extent, because of human nature, engaging in it is necessary. And then it is left to the individuals with regards to how they do so and what they're willing to accept or not. Or in some cases, where the line of necessity falls. That last question there is something perhaps where we could only judge in hindsight, and is it fair to do so? Who knows? With that said, make today a good day, as Mr. Shah would always say. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe. It's nice to be nice to everyone that you interact with, not just the people you like. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The community hospital.